Thank you very much. It's always good to get two Greek names in the first panel, I say, at Investopia, the World Government Summit, and the moderator handled them beautifully, so thank you very much. Picking up on the comments of His Excellency Abdullah bin Turk Al Mahri, the framework was a good one because we know where this ministry is going, particularly with its trade agreements that they're being established during a period post-pandemic. So instead of sitting on your laurels and hoping that the best will happen, it's better to reboot and have a plan and a strategy. So what we want to cover in our 40-minute session here today is to look at where we are. We had this revving up post-pandemic and then yet another challenge. So if you look over the last 12 years, it's a global financial crisis, growth, winding down from that crisis, and then you get a pandemic, a shock to supply chains, inflation going up, and then we have conflict in Russia and Ukraine, creating absolute challenges when it comes to energy supplies and energy prices. But very importantly, for the least developed economies of the world right now, particularly in Africa, higher prices for food. And we know the trigger points that provides for those who can least afford it. We have a superb panel. His Excellency from Greece, the Minister of Industry and Development, looking at Greece 2.0 from the NGO, or international government organizations. Rebecca's going to talk about those least developed economies. And then we have a private sector fund coming from the United States in Anthony Scaramucci. I think it's wise for us to kind of deal with the elephant in the room, and that is, what are we seeing already from the geopolitical tensions? Because we got excited about the post-pandemic recovery, unlocking supply chains, and then you look at the economic challenges, potentially the fallout of the division between emerging markets and the developing world. Rebecca, do you want to start there and what you're seeing for the least developed economies? And I'll come back to His Excellency the Minister Georgiadis.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation, Minister. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a very important moment for the world. In fact, it's true. We were seeing a very strong recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. It was a divergent trajectory. You know, developing countries were not doing as well as developed countries, but there was a lot of opportunity in trying to recover and make it right. Yes, the war in Ukraine is taking world growth down by, according to our projections, by 1 percentage point, and it will hit very strongly the developing world because of high food prices, high energy prices, high fertilizer prices, and a very limited fiscal space after COVID. Yes, so you have finance, you have fuel, you have food, and you have fertilizers, 4 Fs that are really hitting the developing world. Let's remember that 104 countries in the world are net importers of food, net importers of food. So when you have this rise in the in food products, in food commodities, wheat is going up very steeply. You know that Russia and Ukraine are 30% of the trade market in wheat, 30% of barley, 20% of maize. You know, you can continue saying that. And so you can see that according to the projections of the UN, you could have in the least developed countries and in the developing countries, you know, an increase of 13 million people undernourished because of the crisis that we are seeing today on top of COVID, on top of climate change. So let me just finish here saying this, John. There is enough food in the world. There is enough fuels. There is enough fertilizers. There is enough finance. The problem is how we will distribute that for the crisis, not really to hit the most vulnerable in the world and the most vulnerable countries.
I want to do a quick follow-up with you. Does it lead us to map differently our global supply chains for oil and natural gas, the pipeline network and the strains we've seen with gas prices going up 500% in the last year in Europe alone? But very importantly, food.
Yeah.
I mean, to have 30 to 50% of your supplies dependent on two countries, it makes you wonder, why didn't we think about this before? An over-reliance on a couple of major countries that did supply, but it's not planning well for the future.
Well, I think that we definitely will see more investments in agriculture and new technologies.
But what's with the human
future.
species? We plan after the crisis.
Yeah, we don't learn, do we? But let me just maybe say this. I don't believe that what we are going to see is deglobalization. I think that what we are going to see is more regionalization of trade. And so it's different from deglobalization, yes? We are going to see shorter global value chains, and we are going to see more regional value chains, and we are going to see more diversification of sources of inputs in the world. That doesn't mean deglobalization. It means a different a way of going about global.
Okay, this is very interesting because, Your Excellency, Greece is a global economy, and in fact, under Prime Minister Mitsotakis is looking for foreign direct investment. We've seen it come in from the UAE and Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, in the hospitality sector, the old airport that's being restructured into a new development zone for housing and office space, Costco in the port of Piraeus. If Greece is very global, we know about its shipping industry in the same vein, do you have to rethink the 2.0 regeneration strategy, redevelopment strategy you have for Greece as a result of this?
First of all, Your Excellencies, I want to thank you for the invitation in this wonderful country. And I want to send a message from Greece that we really care and trust United Emirates. And thank you for all the support we have all this time. The Chinese have a proverb. They say, I wish you not to live in interesting times. For us in Greece, since 2010, when our adventure started with, you know, at that time, the austerity measures and the bankruptcy, when we exited, we thought we were now okay, and we started a new era. Then the pandemic came. Everybody started to doubt if we could manage to sustain ourselves. We managed to do it. You know, 2021 was an excellent year for Greece's economy. We have most probably the second largest increase of our GDP in European Union in 2021, almost 9%. And we're very happy that we have recovered all the damages of COVID just in a single year. And we started 2022 with great expectations again for a fantastic year. And the truth is, Greece's economy still stands well. And our expectation is still for a year with significant growth. In the beginning of the year, before the invasion, we thought it would be over 5%. Now it should be 1.5% lower. 3.5, 4% as it seems. Our tourist season goes excellent. The predictions and the bookings says that we'll have the best performance in our tourist ever. You know, my friend, after the pandemic, many people think that they have to go out and have some fun, and Greece is one of the places they can do that. Foreign direct investments goes extremely well. 2021 was a year of high record for Greece's economy in FDIs, and as it seems that follows 2022, especially in the areas of renewable energy, logistics, tourism, of course, real estate, agriculture, and in manufacturing. So our expectations are still good, but of course we would prefer that this war hadn't happened, because the energy crisis influenced a lot our economy as the whole European Union, even though our economy is not so dependent from Russian natural gas, much less than other European countries. But the high prices, of course, gives us a big inflation and makes our life much more difficult. Now, the plan of 2.0 of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, you know that we had one very concrete plan. It took a lot of good work from EU Commission. It was one of the first plans that was approved by EU Commission, has in front a lot of digitalization of the country, reforms in the public sector, a lot of investments, public investments and private investments in various areas of the economy. Now, if we have to change it, it's soon to say. You know that 2 days ago in the European Leaders Summit, Mrs. von der Leyen said that maybe we should see a new use of RRF under this new era of Ukraine war.
So you're suggesting, and we can come back to you after I bring in Anthony Scaramucci, you're suggesting there's already a rethink, because what we're talking about here is about $70 billion, right, in terms of loans and grants. So let's park it there for now, Minister, and I'll come back to you and like what that new landscape's going to look like. So it's great to have Anthony Scaramucci with us because we heard from Rebeca about some of the economic challenges today. The viewpoint from Greece, which sits at the heart of the Med and has had a great deal of interest for foreign direct investment, particularly over the last 3 years of this administration. But how do you see the global economic outlook? That's our mission here today. And the dangers, Anthony, it's very interesting. Larry Fink's going to be with us at 12:15 from BlackRock, and he put out his investor letter, which I'm sure we've all had a chance to peek at. And he was saying globalization is dead. I think they wanted to get everybody's attention to say that's the risk of it. That's a fairly choppy environment to reset after the pandemic. How do you see that?
Are you going to be moderating him?
I am.
Okay, so I want you to ask him a question. Was he really serious about that, or was that a provocative statement? Because globalization is very far from dead. But before I get into that, I want to thank Minister Abdullah for bringing me here. Thank you. I love your country. And what I love the most about this country is the inclusion and the willingness to bring people together here in the UAE. Even if people appear to be adversaries right now, as we remember from World War II, adversaries become friends and allies. And someday I'm very, very optimistic that who's ever in an adversarial position right now will likely be an ally, because ultimately we need each other. And so I would challenge Larry, and I know Larry a long time, I would challenge him about the idea that globalization is dead. I would say very far from it. We need each other more now than ever before. Madam Secretary brings up the issue of allocation of resources. We know that there are certain countries that are very, very rich. Other countries are very poor. And I think at this time in our world history, we're all growing a little bit tired of that. So we're searching for solutions that are not necessarily right-leaning or left-leaning, but more solutions that are right or wrong. Not only for my country, but for the world. And so for me, I sit here today on this beautiful morning in the UAE, very optimistic about the world. I think about Greece for a second. In 2012, sir, you guys were running into a great deal of economic uncertainty. And look at your country today. It's growing, it's prosperous. You guys have done an amazing job of rebuilding the country, and congratulations to you. And I think it's very, very important for us to step back from the current climate. It's easy sometimes to be pessimistic. We just went from a pandemic into a conflict in Eastern Europe, but let's see through that. We've got the introduction of AI, biotechnology, new genomic technology, vertical farming. There's all of these major things that are about to hit the world. And what it's really incumbent upon is our world leaders to come together, figure out how to allocate resources properly. And while world leaders are thinking about that, there's a younger generation of people that are figuring out ways to use technology to decentralize the world, John. And so you're looking at the blockchain now being this massive delayering mechanism for our society. The blockchain, to me, is a mechanism that will take out middlemen and women from transactions, which will make things way more productive. And if things are decentralized, it takes power away from people that sometimes can act in a malevolent way. And so I'm optimistic about that as well. So I sit here, I would challenge Larry Fink on the notion that globalization is dead. I would say far from it. We need each other more today than ever before. I predict that the UAE will have a very big influence globally over the next 10 years as it continues to bring people together. It's a prosperous country. It's very well managed and well governed. And I think it's a symbol for a lot of other countries in terms of how to treat people across economic classes. And so for me, I'm very optimistic. I'm hopeful that we'll get to a ceasefire in the Ukraine with the Russian government, and then we can move forward. The supply chain will be less disrupted in 2023. Inflation is probably being overstated as a result of those two factors. And so I sit here very optimistic, and globalization is far from dead.
It's very interesting what you're saying. There's a great deal of opportunity in the next 5 years. I think the crunch is going to come, and I'd love to hear from the panel. How do we get from here to there? And I was suggesting to the Secretary General, there was no pre-planning on energy. We wanted to flip the switch and go from hydrocarbons to renewables. And Anthony, this was led by the ESG, by the pension funds of the United States or the university endowment saying we don't want to hold hydrocarbons. Let me follow up with Anthony quickly, and I'd love to get your thoughts, Rebecca, as well. What is it that we can't do medium-term planning? You can't leap and have the pendulum swing to renewables overnight and then have a choke point when there's a crisis. So how do we get the private sector, which has to make those decisions regularly, and governments in collaboration to be more realistic about transitions? I even said the same thing about food supply chains. This is where globalization is failing.
Well, I think we have to be honest with each other. I mean, we are still very dependent on carbon emission. And I would submit to people around the world to think about long-term planning. I could say in the United States, not to be critical, but our public servants don't have 10-year plans. We need a 10-year plan in the U.S. for infrastructure, for right-sizing K through 12 education, and for moving the country to energy independence, but also carbon-less energy. And so what I would say is take a step back in the Western democracies and start pushing public servants for long-term planning. And so we don't have that right now. But if we did, I think it would be easy to guide the world over the next decade to way less carbon emission. But the problem right now is that if you look at the United States, we're on 2- and 4-year election cycles, and people are not really focused. I'm glad that we went back into the Paris Accord, but we need way more meaningful direction. And you know, and I know, John, that the way to do that is to bubble it up from the bottom. It's the same thing with Bitcoin as an example. Most of the regulators and most of the ministers of finance do not want Bitcoin. And that was very similar with Uber. The regulators did not want Uber. But you know who wanted Uber? The people wanted Uber, and ultimately the people won out. I think the people will win out on Bitcoin, and I think we need more bottom-up push in our society to our public leaders saying, hey, what are we doing here? We've got a very serious issue with the climate. How are we going to fix it? And so until you get that long-term planning, you're going to see this sort of knee-jerk reaction continuing.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate your conversation about medium-term and long-term planning. I want to circle back to that with the two of you on the cryptocurrency. Isn't there a role of the media here? And I'd love to hear Rebecca's views and Anthony's on this. If you look at it, there's 4 million migrants going into the eastern flank of Europe. It's less than 1% of the European Union population. I mean, absorption should be possible, right? So we don't have to panic about it. So it's a challenge, but it's not impossible, Rebecca, would you say?
Not at all. Most of the migration is in the developing world, not in the developed world. And the developed world has much more resources to deal with it than the developing world. But let me just react to two things that were said here. One is how common is to forget that the short and the long term start at the same time. Yes,
That's interesting.
It's
That's
not
very
that
profound.
the long term is like a successive cycle of short terms. You need to start at the same time your vision of what you are doing today with the vision of the long term. And I think that the UAE is a very good example. Yes, it's because they had that utopia in terms of where you wanted to get, that the short term was done, and the policies were precisely for that to be achieved. And so I think that is very important, this long-term vision. And for that, I think that you said, Anthony, and you are right. You know, productive policies are back. You need, policies to be able to drive the long term. So you need the investment in infrastructure, you need the investment in the digital, you need the investment in climate change, and you cannot do that only, by the invisible hand. You need the private-public partnerships to be able to do that. And you know, for such a long term, we thought that industrial policy or productive policies were a bad word, and we are paying for it. So I think that it's very important to build the capacities I am talking about the emerging markets, about the developing world, to build the capacities for them to be able to take the right turn, you know, to take the right policies for investment facilitation, for infrastructure, for investment in human capital, you know, for this transformation to be possible also in the developing world. Because let's be frank, you know, a world where you won't take care of the needs of the majority of the population won't be stable. Yes, if we want stability, if we want more certainty, we will have to invest in the developing world, and we will have to invest in a more inclusive and sustainable development.
Okay, these are very directional mics, so I'm going to have to have you face this direction, otherwise I can't hear you, and I think the audience, no, it's not your problem, you're actually in dialogue. I have one quick follow-up for you, and then I want to bring Anthony in on cryptocurrencies and the dollar, if I can. Are 20th century institutions proving to be outdated? And I know you're going to modernize, UNCTAD, and you've been there for 6 months. But how do you do so? Because the ultimate test of the WHO was at its doorstep. The Secretary General had warned, in fact, about a pandemic at the World Government Summit 4 years ago, that it was at our doorstep, and nobody wanted to listen to it. And then we did hoarding. We in fact broke the global supply chains when it came to vaccines, unlike the UAE that was actually shipping vaccines out. I mean, that's a failure of the relationship between an IGO and its membership. And the private sector rose to the challenge and produced vaccines. But we had a huge political problem, which was disappointing. If you look at the next generation, they say, how is it possible you isolate the developing world from vaccines?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, still, you know, the least developed countries have vaccinated less than 10% of their population, while the rich countries have vaccinated 75% of their population, yes. You know, I think that the question is out there. I have to be honest, you know, a more multipolar world, we still don't know if we'll also be more multilateral.
Well, so this goes back to Larry Fink and his point that globalization is broken, though, right? I mean, we're saying it's not the case.
It's more multipolar. It's not necessarily that we are less interdependent. Or that globalization is not happening. It's happening. But the means to deal with it in a more rational and efficient way, probably still we have these weaknesses of a multilateral structure that still mirrors the last century and not this century. Yes.
Minister Georgiadis, one of your pillars of the European Union restructuring and regeneration plan for Greece is digitalization. And a lot of people overlook the fact it's a very educated population that wanted to leave Greece before because there wasn't opportunity. So two key cornerstones of the regeneration plan is digitalization and also the greening of the economy, both wind and solar, obvious in Greece. Do those things get parked on the sidelines as a result of what we're seeing? After all, our outlook here is to 2025. What happens between now and 2025 to that regeneration plan? What the European Union was suggesting is that we need to tweak it already as a result of Russia-Ukraine.
The main vision our government has, the main vision, is to reshape our country to a much more modern way. And I think for the 2.5 years we are in the government, this has already started happening. If you, and I don't know if you have come to Greece.
Are you kidding?
You are Greek origin, but are you coming fast in Greece?
My wife's half Greek, half Italian. I was married in Greece. I go every single year.
Good. So you have seen the change.
Are you kidding? Yeah.
2.5 years ago, in order to take just a simple paper from the public sector, you had to come to a ministry. Today you can do everything through your cell phone, with GovGR, almost everything. You don't have to see me or anybody else, only if you want to come and meet me, of course. You're very welcome. So the digitalization goes very, very fast. We are putting out the bureaucracy and all the obstacles of bureaucracy as fast as we can. The plan is still there until 2025, the country to be totally digitalized, not either way, and very fast for an investor that would care to come. We want to show that we respect other people's time and money. So nothing has changed. And of course, about renewable energy, this is the biggest vision we have now, because what is happening? Greece is a country that imports oil and gas from abroad. This creates a big deficit, even though we have plenty of sun, plenty of wind power, and now the technology can give us a lot of advantages that we didn't have it in the past. So our decision is to go as fast as possible to renewable energy and transform the disadvantage of importing oil and gas to an advantage of having renewable energy with low cost in our economy. And I think in the next 3, 4, 5 years, the most, you will see a huge change in that area, even now as we speak. And after the war, the foreign direct investments that are coming to the renewable energy in Greece are beyond any expectation.
Because we're laying out now to 2025, the greatest risk. But Egypt last week raised interest rates. The IMF was there to help. Sorry?
Egypt, Pakistan,
So
Ghana.
is that the lesson that we've gotten a wake-up call from Russia, Ukraine? We'd learned from the pandemic, we'd learned from the global financial crisis, that, to your point, that Europe was woken up, the European Union was woken up. Rebecca, do you want to start there, that it's all hands on deck? Is that the state?
Yeah, the fact is that at the beginning of the COVID-19, we saw a very fast response from the international organizations. And despite the nationalism that was at the beginning of the crisis, we saw slowly more collective action coming together. So learning from that, we have to do it again, because in many of the decisions we took to face COVID-19 crisis, we're in the right direction, but not in the right quantum. And we need to increase the quantum. If we are not ambitious, if we don't scale up the support, then the worst will come to be true in many of the developing world.
Okay, one quick question, then I want to get your forecast from now to 2025. What could be the greatest shock? So think about it. For Greece, individually.
Another one?
Yeah, well, you never know. That's the point. That's what we're here for. That's why we sit at this Investopia, correct? But there's a little bit of hypocrisy taking place here. Rebecca, if you can address it on behalf of the developing countries, because you do represent them. We're more dependent on natural gas, particularly Russian natural gas, in the European Union than ever before. The U.S. is shipping LNG now to Europe to fill the gap. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission and European President, was in Senegal less than a month ago. They've made a huge natural gas discovery, and they said, we don't want to invest in hydrocarbons. So we have 600 million Africans that don't have access to electricity. Mozambique, Tanzania, Senegal, huge natural gas deposits. We know it's a transition fuel for at least the next 30 years. And we're saying we're not going to support you with development funds to get it onto the market. Doesn't sound ridiculous? When we see the dependency in Europe on this, you can't expect Africa to go from no electricity straight to renewables that quickly.
Well, it's true, but partially true, because gas was always part of the transition. It's not that it wasn't. You know, you cannot, the transition is a transition. It's not the end point. So gas was always part of it. And the stranded asset problem in the developing world has always been discussed, yes? And remember that to get to zero emissions, you don't have to get to zero production. So it depends who continues to produce for longer. And I think that that's precisely the political discussion, the geopolitical discussion that we are in. But the truth is that many of the renewables are cheaper for many of these countries than, to go for the big investments. And most of the people that don't have access to energy are in the rural areas of Africa. They won't get, the lines to be able to benefit from the large investments. You need the renewable investments for these people to have access to energy. So I think that we have to move away from the trade-offs to the win-wins, There are win-wins that with the right policies, with the right investments, with the right distribution, can really get us to more sustainability and more inclusion at the same time.
Yeah, the off-grid solutions that you're talking about in Africa are pretty impressive. So,
On-grid solutions are not the only solution
no,
for the rural area.
absolutely the case. I just thought there was hypocrisy because we're more dependent in Europe on natural gas than ever. And the Eastern Med should come on stream and solve political problems. But I want to, as I promised, I think a takeaway for this audience, and we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask for no more than 90 seconds each from you. We discussed robustly what we're faced with today. What are we not seeing that's a potential risk or an opportunity? You started positive, Anthony, on the outlook that you don't think this is long-term shock of inflation. What do you think is the greatest risk or opportunity over the next 3 years?
So just quickly, the greatest risk, I think, is the systemic rise of nationalism. And so what we learn from history is people start to forget their living memory of war, they have a tendency to glorify it. And so if you read Barbara Tuchman's book, The Guns of August, how did World War I start? It was a series of mistakes, but there was bellicosity of rhetoric and a rise of nationalism. We're now 80 years out from the last global conflict, and so our world leaders and the living memory of those wars are no longer with us. And so the way that we need to cheat history and not to cycle back into a military conflict, a global military conflict, is through the flywheel of prosperity. Because what we find is the more prosperous people are and the deeper the global middle class is and rising living standards around the world, the less likelihood there is of a conflict. But that is our biggest threat, in my opinion, is that we start to go after each other. We deconstruct globalism as opposed to staying together to figure out ways to solve our problems globally.
Very interesting. The flywheel of capitalism, what you just said?
Flywheel of prosperity.
That's really interesting.
I actually think it's a private-public partnership along the lines of what Rebecca said. Remember, when the United States made the decision to go to the moon, it was $25 billion, 1969 dollars, approximately $400 billion of today's dollars. But it fused the public sector and the private sector together. It unleashed over $2 trillion of economic activity. We didn't just pick up tinfoil and tang. We got the GPS, the internet, global cellular communication. All of that came from the Moon Project, and you needed the government's help to make that happen. There was no invisible hand that was going to put that together on its own.
Interesting. It's a model we see in the UAE today, obviously. The Mars space probe, the development of fintech, the incubator space that they're chasing today. Rebecca, your final thoughts, and I'll finish with the minister.
Well, the major risk is social malaise, is political instability. Because if people will be frustrated, if they won't see social mobility, if they cannot put food in the table, the correlation between the commodity food index and social instability is very high. So let's preclude that correlation.
It's interesting. We saw it 2007 and 2008,
Yep.
and it was a major trigger for the Arab Spring, correct?
In fact, we are now in a higher index of food commodity prices than in 2008, 2009.
Okay. Minister Georgiadis.
What Anthony said before I wanted to comment was an ancient Roman proverb, si vis pacem para bellum. It was from the Romans. That's exactly what you said, and that's exactly what we believe. We don't purchase weapons because we love war. We purchase weapons and we fix our national security because we love peace. It's so simple. The biggest threat would be that the food crisis, if it would come to the non-developed world, would destabilize many countries, such as the countries you mentioned, Egypt, for example, and that this could cause huge political trouble to everybody. So we have to be very careful on that and try to find fast solutions to this danger before it will really happen. And this is something that our government cares a lot. And as I told you before, our Prime Minister is very active under European level in this area. But I want to finish as I started. I'm still very optimistic. A de-globalization, as you mentioned, will not happen, because if it would happen, this could be a real danger. What would come next? Globalization is something that many people accuse for many reasons. It changes their lives, it makes them feel threat from the new technology, from the new world. But at the end of the story, it gave wealth and a big standard of living that never has happened in world history. So going back would be extremely painful. I don't want to see it happening. And we have to explain to everybody that working together, especially in the center of the climate crisis, that cannot be handled from one country alone, as much as a country this is. We have to find ways to work together, and I have to acknowledge what UAE is doing in all these areas. I follow your nuclear program about producing electricity, which is fantastic and very, very efficient. In renewable energy, many people think that UAE is only a country that produces oil. This is not the case. UAE now can produce high technology in various areas, and this is a world example. This is what we want to follow, and this is the reason we're very, very happy you are our friends and we are here today.
Good. Everybody was laughing when they came up with that idea of nuclear power. It's 25% of their power generation today.
I told you I follow it very closely.
It's cleaner, and nobody's laughing now. Let's put it that
and
way,
I can tell that your leadership has a real strong vision for the future.
Good. My first visit to the UAE in Dubai specifically was 1990, and I remember doing a story about this being the Hong Kong of the Middle East. And my caveat in the story was that would be under threat because of the invasion of Kuwait, which happened in the summer of 90 and the war in 1991. And I remember the leadership here telling me, you have that equation wrong. We create opportunity out of crisis. The idea is to create the conditions for people wanting to move to your country and then build the infrastructure for them to manage. So we should take that same attitude of the positivity of what we see in the crisis in Europe today.
We are using the same crisis as an opportunity in Greece, to be honest. You know, under the pandemic, what we did, we changed our law in order to have very low taxation for people that wanted to come to work from abroad to Greece.
Yeah.
Using these digital nomads and far distance working place, and we can offer an excellent place for working, you know. Some of you, maybe you would like during your summertime to come and live in Greece. You will find it very, very comfortable. So yes, a crisis can be an opportunity if you just do your job.
I'm going to Crete, by the way. You always said if I come to Greece very often. We're going to Crete in July, before the crowds come in August.
Okay.
His Excellency Abdullah bin Turk Al Mahri said we want a very solid opening panel. I got to say, that's one of the better panels I've done in a long, long time with all the different ideas. So I appreciate all three of you coming at this.
Thanks, John.
From many, many different spectrums. We'll have His Excellency in the closing panel today at 4:30. I would invite you to come because it's a special look at the emerging markets. We talked about Larry Fink and his end of globalization. His Excellency Haldun Al-Mubarak and Larry Fink will be here at 12:15. I would strongly urge you to come and attend that, and congratulations to the program. There's a lot going on, but Investopia has a lot of good value added. A lot of round of applause to this group for handling all those questions. Thanks very much.